Hi, I'm Liz and I'm very interested in local history.
Hi, I'm Lillian and Liz here is going to tell me about the history of Port Glasgow as I know nothing about it.
Okay, so we're starting here at the beautiful Newark Castle on the south bank of the River Clyde. It was built in the mid-15th centuries for the Maxwell family, but in 1668 the Maxwells sold part of their land to the west to the magistrates and town council of Glasgow because they wanted a port of their own. At that time, the River Clyde wasn't as deep as it is now. It hadn't been dredged or anything, and large ships could only get as far as Greenock or Newark Bay, which is just the other side of the castle, and couldn't get all the way up to Glasgow. So cargoes had to be offloaded and then taken by smaller boat all the way up to Glasgow. The Glasgow magistrates and merchants were not happy about this, so they decided to build their own port, and the land they chose was sold to them by the Maxwells, so they set up their new port for Glasgow. Okay, so here we're on the west side of Newark Castle and we've just passed Ferguson Marine Shipbuilding Yard. But this is where the very first shipbuilding yard in Port Glasgow started. It was called the Newark Yard, and it was started by two brothers, David and William McGill, who actually came from Dunbar. So they set up a shipbuilding business here, but later they sold it and moved across to Dumbarton. The lovely building is the former Guruk Ropeworks building. It's now been turned into loft apartments. It's a beautiful building, and the Guruk Ropework Company were a huge international company making ropes and canvas sails for the many ships all over the world. But rope making started in Port Glasgow in the 1730s. A group of tobacco lords decided to set up a rope works because of the increase in trade. Ships coming into this new port needed rigging, they needed sails. So these tobacco lords set up a rope work. It was called the Port Glasgow Rope and Duck Company, and duck just means canvas cloth. So that building was on that side. The original ropework building for Port Glasgow was probably a wee bit further west behind the high flats there. But for many years there was a rope walk behind the building running parallel with the railway line, but that's now gone. But it's an interesting and beautiful building. This is the Perch Lighthouse. It was constructed in 1862 as an aid to navigation. It's lit by gas. It was lit by gas which came via an underground pipe from the shore. Underneath the lighthouse is a big rock which was called the Perch, and it really was a danger to navigation. And the busier the port got, the more accidents there were. So that's why they built the Perch Lighthouse there. Okay, so this is the West Quay, or Steamboat Quay as it was known. Right here to the left of these buildings was the West Harbour, and it was a very, very busy place. These buildings date back to the 19th century, and you can see by the archers were meant for horses and carts. Port Glasgow's second custom house was just up there to the south past these buildings, and there are some wonderful pictures of the old West Quay with the harbour here and these buildings here on the right of the harbour. So from here we can see the remains of some of the shipyards that lined the River Clyde, all the way from the castle down to Greenock. All gone now, but this has become a bit of a wildlife haven.
These stones show the details of the shipyards in the area.
This ship is a replica of the famous Comet of 1812, which was the first commercial steam-powered vessel in European waters. This replica was built by local shipyard apprentices in 1962 on the 150th anniversary of the launch of the original. The original Comet was built by Port Glasgow shipbuilder John Wood and owned by Henry Bell of Helensburgh. And John Wood, famous Port Glasgow shipbuilder, his yard was right about here where the Comet is right now. And he and his family built ships in Port Glasgow for many, many years. So the Comet, the replica of the first commercial steam-powered ship in European waters.
Colourful interpretation boards tell you a little bit more about the history of this area and just give that little bit more detail.
So this is the new parish church of Port Glasgow. It's just recently changed its name from St Andrew's Parish Church. It's a beautiful church and this building dates from the 1820s. There has been a church on this site since 1719 and the first church on this site was built in a cruciform shape, that's the shape of a cross. And when they came to build this one, because they needed a bigger church, they couldn't quite dig the foundations for it because there were graves around the original church. So what they had to do was build this church on top of plinths so that they didn't desecrate any of the graves around the former church.
We've now reached Port Glasgow train station where you see these wonderful murals, 14 in total. These were done by the artist Jim Strachan of Rig Arts, and each of them is accompanied by an interpretation board to tell you a little bit more about them. Really quite spectacular, and he's done a number around the town actually in different areas.
Okay. This is Hoodswell and it's in Port Glasgow railway station. It was built as a memorial to Port Glasgow's first station master here, whose name was James Hood. He suggested that a well be provided in the station for the use of passengers after their long hot journeys, and also he was a keen gardener and had lots of tubs of flowers around the station, so it was great for him to use that to water the plants too. This is John Wood Street, named after Port Glasgow's famous shipbuilder John Wood. That's the Star Hotel right across from the railway station, would have been a very popular place. John Wood Street was built between 1909 and 1912 during the massive redevelopment of the Bay Area in the East End of Port Glasgow here. The architects were George Arthur and Son. The scheme for building these tenements was partially financed by the Lithgow family of shipbuilders. When Port Glasgow was set out as a town, it was set out in line with lots of big plots of land, which gradually, as they were sublet, subviewed, people used buildings and split them up into dwellings, and more people were living. And because of its nearness to the dock area, these little alleyways, because there were greenhouses on either side, were frequented by sailors, essentially cheap lodging houses, pubs, shebeens, which were illegal drinking dens, brothels, shops. Everything along these tiny little lanes, and they soon became a byword for crime.
And just down the road, here's another example of one of these narrow alleys.
Right here, all the men coming out, and there's you can see how many boats, tugs, steamers, all sorts.
It's kind of hard to imagine now, isn't it?
And if you look over there on the left-hand side of the mural, you'll see the church, the town building. This is Port Glasgow's town buildings. It was designed by David Hamilton and built in 1816. It was once situated right on the harbour side of the town. Just to the left of the building was the harbour. It served a multitude of purposes. It had a court, council chamber, prison and the police department. The steeple is 150 feet high and at the top is a weather vane in the form of a fully rigged ship. The building was refurbished in the 1990s and now houses the town's library. Just to the left of the building you'll see a beautiful lamp. That's an old provost lamp. Used to be in this area when someone became provost of the town. A beautifully decorated lamp was posted outside their house so that everyone knew that's where the provost lived. And the Provost Lamp, like the town buildings, has the town's coat of arms.
Final stopping point, the Endeavour sculpture, designed by Malcolm Robertson in 2012.
Thank you for joining us on our walk round historic Port Glasgow. Hopefully you've learned something new and had a chance to appreciate some of the rich local history of the area. We're just going to head back now towards Newark Castle and where we started the tour from. To everybody out there who might be at home shielding and maybe not getting out as much as they'd like to, we wish you all the very best, and we hope to be able to welcome you onto one of our health walks or one of our history walks at some point in the near future. Thank you to Liz and Lillian for helping us with today's tour and for sharing their local history and passion for the area with us. Thank you.
So thanks for joining us today on the Port Glasgow Heritage Trail. Liz, who led today's tour, has produced a wonderful leaflet which talks in more detail and shows photographs of some of the key aspects of Port Glasgow's history, and she'd be very happy for anybody to go into her blog post, The Greenokian, and to check that out under Port Glasgow Heritage Trail. Okay, thanks everybody, stay safe, bye.